Oh, thank you. Can you hear me well from distance? Is it all right? Good. Well, I'm really honored to meet so many librarians. I have to say, I'm very grateful to most librarians I met in my life. I learn a lot from them, and the best advice I could give you, always take the conductors and bring them into the library, because most conductors don't know what you have in the library, and there are great treasures there. And I learned a lot from those hidden treasures. I don't know, things pop up in my mind, like the wonderful George Sell collection in the Cleveland Library. I've seen the great original scores of Rachmaninoff in the Philadelphia Library. I mean, there are treasures everywhere. And, take the conductors there, because they should see the libraries. Really, that's the best advice. Now, one thing I wanted to share my ideas with you, because it keeps my mind occupied all the time, is that there are the notes and there are the markings under or above the notes. And of course, there's so much work of libraries going into arranging those markings, and I'm sure musicians torture you in being more and more precise and more elaborate, and with the up bows and the down bows and the short and the long notes and all those things. And I wanted to tell you, recently I had a very special experiment. This was in the Glyndebourne Opera Festival in England. We performed the whole Mozart opera, and I agreed with the orchestra not to use the pencil. And we had a completely clean set of orchestral parts, and nobody was allowed to write anything in the parts. And the purpose was, this was a wonderful, very serious experiment, because I thought that if the musicians have less fixed instructions, they will pay more attention to the singer. Because if the singer does something on the stage, but the musician's interpretation is fixed in those markings, they cannot react. But if nothing is fixed, then they pick up the ideas, they imitate, they go into an interaction with the stage, and the opera performance becomes more alive. And after that, most musicians said that it was liberating. It was a wonderful feeling not to have fixed way of playing written in the parts. Now, it's just maybe a thought-provoking thing. It's not something you can put into practice in any way, but you will have ideas from this experiment. I mean, I remember when we did it, and we also talked about, actually, this was a Mozart opera. What happened in Mozart's time, for God's sakes? I mean, there was no pencil being used. So if you had to put in an up bow or a down bow, you risk that the ink pot falls on the music or the instrument. Imagine, where do you put the ink, and where do you use the, whatever feather or pen, or you have to, dip into it. I mean, no way you could use it during a rehearsal. And this explains to me that most parts of the time have no markings whatsoever from the 18th century. So the musicians just simply knew how to play, or they improvised, they paid much more attention to each other. And then eventually we end up now in a culture where everything must be fixed, and it robs the creativity and it robs the interaction of the artists involved. So I think, on the one hand, I'm usually quite glad if the markings are clear, because it allows a unified, perfectly organized performance. This is what all of us are doing, and I benefit, I'm very happy. On the other hand, there is a question mark in me, especially after our wonderful experiment, which says maybe we should wipe it all out and have just only the composition there, and that would awaken a new style of creativity. And I really believe in it, and I think this might be a future generation will look into this new way of music making, which allows more improvisation, allows more spontaneous thinking, listening to each other, and less rigid, militant, fixed instructions fixed on the page. This is just a thought-provoking idea which I want to throw in, and please discuss it and come up with some brilliant wisdom. I want to hear about it. Well, I mean, really, it's so lovely to have you all here in Washington, and I hear you will talk about how to program things like opera galas, pop concerts, and all. And I want to learn, so I hope to receive the summary of these brilliant discussions, and I wish you great fun and a lot of new ideas emerging from this conference. And thank you very much for coming here, and enjoy dinner.